onto here. The way that we'll do this, as we always do, is we'll start standing, and then particularly, obviously, Margaret, thinking about your wrists and things, or your arm, that if you don't want to do the rest of it, then you don't have to, because the rest of it will come to the floor at some point. But we'll do our standing work first. And the first thing we want to do is set up our standing posture. So let's do that. Feet together, turn the toes out to 45 degrees, and then follow with the heels. And a quick look down, so we're checking that the feet are about 2 fist distance apart. The feet are parallel, so you haven't got any or either of the feet turning in or out. And the weight is equally distributed between the toes and the heels. And we do that because our weight is meant to go through almost the middle of our foot. So a little swaying backwards and forwards might help, just to assist you to find that. And when you've done it, just move into the pelvis, and we'll do that little pelvic tilt. Now, I'm conscious that this can be quite, well, certainly for me anyway, but other people that I see, this can be quite difficult to isolate. So a lot of us, when we go to tuck the pelvis under and push back, we have a tendency to either want to push backwards and forwards with our knees, or the other thing I see a lot of is the shoulders getting involved. And really nothing should move except the pelvis. Now we can check in on that later on, but for now just see what it feels like. And as you tuck your bum under, so it's almost like as I turn my front bottom towards the window, I feel a tightening in my tummy. And then as I push back and kind of almost get that little duck tail, then you feel a little bit of a stretch in the hip flexors and a bit of work in the bottom of the back. And then move up to the shoulders. So roll the shoulders round, back and down, and just ease the chin back so that you're trying to set your skull on top of your spine. Now, in the middle, one of our fundamental principles is to move with precision. So draw your belly button towards your spine, shrink the waist inwards at the sides, and then tighten the pelvic floor so that everything around here feels active. And then breathe. Another fundamental principle is that we are meant to breathe with our movement. So inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. There may well be a point where you get confused with the breathing. And if that happens, don't even worry about it. It's not important, so long as you're breathing. Okay, please don't give up on that. So keep breathing. And then when you're ready, we'll bring the arms in. And we're going to bring first one arm forward, then out, and then into the side. Then we'll do the same on the other side. Forward, out, and in. Now, as we move the arms, we're trying to stay tight in the middle, to keep the tailbone tucked under, to keep the weight equally distributed through the toes and the heels, to keep the shoulder, oh, there's a lot to do, isn't there? To keep the shoulders down and away from our ears, and to keep a rough count on how many we're doing. Now this one should be the 8th one, so it will be our last repetition. And then holding the arms down, gently bend at the waist. First one side and then the other. And this is all part of a standard protocol for warming up in Pilates, where we always want to move the spine during our warm-up. So side to side, and again, 4 to each side. Again, keeping the hips still. Then come into the middle and do both arms at once. So breathe in and breathe out. Now it's a little harder when you do both arms at once to keep the rib cage still. We're tempted to either lift the ribs, so we're tempted to either bring them up or and perhaps both, to stick them out. And I'd like you to do neither, but instead stay connected. It almost feels like you're trying to connect your diaphragm down into your belly button, if that makes sense. I'm sure anatomically that doesn't make sense, but that's kind of how it feels. Now, on the last repetition, just hold the arms out. Bend the elbows and squeeze across the chest. Now breathe in and squeeze back. And what we're trying to do now is push the shoulder blades towards the middle of the back. But I'm still in neutral. So my back is still not arching. So there's no forward push with either the chest or the hips. It's just a drive backwards with the elbows until the shoulder blades meet up. Now on the last one, finish with the arms folded and twist. First one way, back into the center, and then the other way. Breathe in to recenter and try and breathe out to twist. Ideally, we're keeping the hips as still as we can. Getting that little round movement to warm up the spine in a rotational way. Last repetition. And we come back into the center. Relax the arms down. Now, a little bit of tension around the neck, so we're going to try and release that. So as you breathe in, bring the shoulders up. As you breathe out, drop them down. Now, as you do this, I tend to bring my shoulders up and forward. I'd like you to try and remember to bring them up and slightly back. And I find that means I can't quite go as high actually, but I feel more of a release around the shoulder blades. Right, last repetition, there. Now keeping the shoulders still, the hips still, just turn and look over one shoulder. Then do the same to the other side. Now, the slower you go, the more control you have and the less likely you are to feel a little bit dizzy. So it gives your ear time to keep up with your head as you just gently turn. And as ever in these online classes, the way that I tend to do it is to suggest that we always do 8 or 4 repetitions to each side. And that just helps us when things are sometimes a bit confusing. Now come back into the center and just drop your head to the side, center, and then the other side. And as your right ear goes to your right shoulder, push down with your opposite arm. So the opposite arm pushes away towards the floor to increase the stretch. And one of the things I notice here, I don't know if it's because I'm short, but my chin always wants to lift up towards the ceiling. Probably because I'm always talking to people up there. So keep your chin tucked in and try not to let it rise. When you've done 8 to each side, 4 to each side, 8 in total, drop your chin onto your chest. Now again, I have a tendency here to stick my bum back. So tailbone tucked under, back stays in neutral, just drop the head. I'm going to link the hands and just rest the hands on the back of my head. Pulling the belly button away from my t-shirt and allowing the head to sink into my chest. And there's a nice stretch for the back of the neck. I'm not actively pulling and pushing today. I'm just using the weight of my arms to stretch my neck. You may even feel it running down into your back, maybe up to your bra strap. Then release the hands and slowly through the neck. Reset, and then we're just going to let one arm swing. Okay, now it doesn't need to be a big move and it doesn't need to be controlled. So I'm not doing a marching move like it's some kind of, sort of North Korean army. I'm just letting it swing. Okay, the hard bit is stopping everything else from moving because it's really tempting to let rip. So keep everything else nice and still. Then try both arms at once. And again, this increases the blood flow into the fingers and it helps us relax our shoulders. Good, let's just do 8 repetitions. There we go. And then in a minute, I'm going to ask you to remember that and we're going to put it together in a little sequence. But for now, check in on the feet, make sure they haven't gone wandering off. And we're going to do our little heel pedal. So lift first one heel and lift the other. Now, in class, back in the day when we used to do live classes and we were all in the same room, quite often I would see people kind of just moving here. But actually, keeping the hips still is where your tummy has to work. So if you focus on pushing through your big toe and little toe and just driving the knee forward, you'll find that you're not only working the calf, the heel, you're working the tummy, and you're also, and particularly if you're on a hard surface, really massaging the ball of your foot. Now I do a fair bit of jumping around and the ball of my foot feels quite gristly almost as I push it through and into the ground. Now from there, just start that little knee bend, and that little knee bend is just pushing the knees forward. Now with the feet hip distance apart, we're reasonably well balanced. You may feel a bit of work in the thighs, but it's probably going to be mostly dominated by a stretch around your calf, ankle, maybe even into the shin. Now we're going to continue that theme, but try to go a little lower. So bend the knees, but now instead of keeping the back straight, allow the bum to go slightly back and then rise. And with each repetition, try to go a little further. Now, I tend to bring my arms up because it gives me better balance. At the moment, for me, I'm struggling to get my knees to go much further forward. See if we can do it a little bit more. But a bit tight in the ankles, so I'm not going much further. Now, when you're ready, just pause at the bottom, wait there, and then lift first one heel, and then the other, 3 or 4 times. If 3 or 4 times is too many, just once is okay. Keep the tailbone so that your back stays in neutral. Don't push your bum out too far. And when you've done that, rise up and your thighs should start to feel it. So we'll do it again. In fact, we'll do it twice more. So we come down, lock into place, and then without moving another muscle, and that control always comes from the center. I'm pushing the knee forward, but all the time my thighs are under a kind of contraction, and then we rise back up. Right, last time, if this is too much, don't do it. Remember, you can just go down and up, or you could just stay with a standing heel pedal. Absolutely fine to split it back into its component parts and not do the whole move. Right, there we go. Now rise up. And then, as ever, I'd like to start a little bit of work on the back and on our balance. So, next step is to just hinge forward from the hip. Now I'm pushing my bum back. So if I was to stand by the wall here, I'd be trying to get my bum to touch the wall. Let me come in a little bit. So I'm pushing my bum back and, oh no, can't quite reach it, but that's the aim. Okay, so as you hinge forward, you're pushing backwards with your bum until the bum nearly, or your back rather, flattens and remains parallel to the floor. That's your aim. Now the legs are almost straight, so there should be a bit of a stretch in the back of the legs, almost from underneath your bottom, if you know what I mean, and then all the way down the back of your legs, across the back of your knees. Right, this time, last time, and up we come now. Do you remember the swings we just did, and also the pull that we did when we were standing? So we're going to add that into our bend. So hinging forward from the hip, pushing the bum back, flattening the back. Now, I'm going to hold one arm on my thigh just to keep it out of the way, and then swing the other arm maybe 8 times. All the time, I'm keeping my tummy tight, then change arms. And as you swing, nothing else moves. And that's the trick, to stay still. Then we do both arms at once. Do you remember? Now I'm trying to get my arms as high as my ears and right up above my ribs at the back. Then I'm going to hold and let the arms dangle. Fold the arms just like when we were standing. Pull the elbows out and squeeze the shoulder blades together. Again, squeeze the shoulder blades together. So it's exactly what we did when we were standing. It's almost like I'm pushing my chest towards the floor. Just a little. Now, as you reach ideally 8 repetitions, you should feel, weirdly, not the arms, but the lower back. Let's do one more. Release and drop. And the other place that I feel it is right down the back of my legs. So my lower back and the back of my legs. Breathe in, and as you breathe out, push the floor away and start to roll up, tucking the tailbone under, rounding the back and coming up little by little to standing. Shoulders back and down. Now, a little bit more work on the legs and the bum. So we've just done a big stretch through the hamstrings. We can do a little bit more work on the legs now. So see if you can rise onto tiptoes. Now, ideally, you come up and you try and stay up. A couple of ways to make it easier. First of all, try lifting one heel at a time and then straightening your legs. The other thing you can do is fix your eyes on a spot on the horizon. But it also helps if you think of going straight up through the crown of your head rather than normally you would stand up on tiptoes and kind of lean forward, right? So try to go straight up and then add into that a squeeze through the glutes, through the bum and the hamstrings. But if it's still too wobbly, then feel free to hold on and just rest your fingertips on a wall or on a chair, work surface, something just to give you that extra little bit of balance. And you should begin to feel the back of your legs, your calves going into your hamstrings again. So now we're going to add that onto our little squat. And again, hold on if you need to. So breathing in, we bend the knees and sink down. Then as you breathe out, try to lift both heels. Breathe in as you put the heels down, and then breathe out to rise. So it will take a couple of breaths to complete. Breathing in. If you don't want to focus on the breath because it's too much, because you're too wobbly or it's just too much to think about, don't worry about it. Concentrate mostly on our movement and control. There we go. I'm going to do one more like that. So down, push the knees forward onto tiptoes, heels down, and rise back up. Good. So from here, let's see what our balance is like on one leg. And again, hold on if it's all a bit much. So it doesn't matter which foot you stand on, but just pick up one leg. And you can do whatever you like with this leg. I'm turning it into some kind of river dance. I don't know why I'm doing that. I'll stop doing that because it's distracting. Just hold the leg. Now it can be on the floor ever so slightly if you want. You can just put it behind you slightly, in front, to side, whatever works, but just see what your balance is like on one leg. And if you can, then try to not hold on. Because that stability is critical for stopping us falling over, right? Now let's try the same on the other side. And here we go. This for me is my wobbly side. I really struggle on this side. So changing feet to this side, I can feel my ankle kind of tremble. There's a kind of little shake down in the lower half of my leg. So we add into this, just to make it that little bit harder. When your leg is off the ground, see what it's like to bend the supporting leg. Just going down and up. Now, if you need that extra support, then take it. But if you can do without, then do without. Because when you're out and about, you're not going to have something to grab onto. And we've all sort of seen how slippy it is over the last couple of weeks. And this kind of thing is going to stop you falling over. Okay, or at least even when you do go to fall, you'll be able to right yourself much more easily. Right, so we do 8 on one side, and then we swap, for me, onto my wobbly side, and then down and up, pushing the floor away. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm trying to think of pushing through my whole foot. That will change slightly the way my knee moves. My tendency, and you may be the same, is that I push out the way. So I tend to push out towards my little toe. If I concentrate on pushing through my big toe, little toe and heel, then my knee starts to run in a more straight line. That's really important for preventing and rehabilitating any knee injuries as well. Now, when you've done the last repetition, reset the feet, so you might need to adjust or move the position. Now, next move, we could do this on a step. So if you wanted to at some point and you've got a step somewhere in the house, then use it. What we're going to do now is just hike up the hip. That's a technical term. So I'm going to put all my weight in one leg and then just lift and lower the hip on the other side, up and down. So it's almost like if you imagine that you had a prosthetic leg, your whole leg, and you were going to walk so you couldn't bend your knee like that. So as if if your knee was in a brace or something and you were going to have to walk without bending your knee, how you would have to lift the hip, yeah, up and down. Now this really targets, and you should start to feel this around here, the top of your bum. It's the glute med, so it's not the big glute max, and it's not the teeny tiny glute min, it's the glute med that really targets. Now try the other side and see how that feels. And again, it's that, you can see the hip going up, the foot comes off the ground, and you're just putting all your weight into one leg, Now for me it's much harder to feel this side because this side is weaker and those muscles don't want to work if they can avoid it. So I start to feel my thigh working instead because my bum muscle is so flipping lazy. Okay, right, so if I concentrate on it, I can get it to work a little bit more. Good. Now reset the legs and come back in. That's something that you might want to consider, you know, even if you put one foot on a step. So I've got like a patio door thing, and I could put my foot on the step or even on the bottom stair and then try to touch the floor and come back up again. It's a nice little way to target those muscles, especially if you don't want to do any floor work. Okay, nearly there with the standing work. The last little bit of work for us today is a big stretch. So deep standing, deep breath, and open your arms, but this time we're going to gently arch the back. Then as you breathe out, round the shoulders and cross the wrists. Breathe in and open up. Breathe out, round the shoulders and cross the wrists. Now, little by little, can you see I'm making this movement bigger? So I'm going further with the arch and then further with the bend. So now your back extends and bends. Arch into the extension, bend forward into the flexion. And this, as you come to the last repetition, and for me, I'm just going to do one more. I'm going to hold the extension. So come up and hold, and then circle the arms round and down and release. Now the rest of the work today is going to be on the floor. So if that's not for you and you need to go, then feel free to go. But otherwise we're going to start sitting down. So we're going to come onto our bums first. So take your time coming down to the floor and onto our bums. Okay. And we're going to continue the work on our back and tummy. So I'm going to put my hands behind me and make this into a comfortable position to start with. So I'm leaning back. Now the only thing I would suggest you do is try not to let your shoulders rise up to your ears. So try and keep your neck nice and long. And then drop the knees from side to side. So we get a little bit of a twist in the lower half of the body. I think I've said to you before that going one way, really easy. Going the other way, I can't get my knees half as close to the floor. Just that tightness on one side. Then come into the center, and just like we were doing standing, a kind of a little stretch back. Lift your chin if that's comfortable, and then lower the chin and round the back. So breathe in and push the chest towards the legs. Breathe out and round the back. Pull the belly button down. Let's just do two more. Big deep breath. Oh. It's almost like you're inflating a balloon, and then the balloon deflates. That's the noise it makes, apparently. Now, from there, we're going to bring ourselves in self-support. So without the hands, bring yourself up nice and tall to sitting. We're going to get you to lengthen the legs away. And again, if this is uncomfortable, you can always pop a little cushion under your bum. In actual fact, you could do a lot of this sitting on a little chair if you prefer. Now I'm going to turn and face you so you can see what I mean. Hang on, here we go. Let's move that back just a little bit. And then I'm going to slide one knee in nice and close and pull myself up tall. And again, it's about the shape of your spine. So really trying to straighten that back. Breathe out and lift. Breathe in and lower. And as soon as you go to lift the leg, there's a desire to lean back or to round the back. Try to pull yourself up really tall through the crown of your head. Now, like I say, you could do this exact same thing on a chair. So you could just lift and lower from a chair. Now, it's a little bit easier, but a bigger range. But the same rule, you've got to sit up really tall. Now, when you've done 8 on one side, whoa, my mat's all over the place. I'm trying to squish it back, there we go. Then switch legs and do 8 to 10 on the other side. I'm kicking the toe right up towards the ceiling. Breathing out as it lifts, breathing in as it drops. And driving the heel away. Now, when you reach that 8th repetition, bend both knees so that the thighs relax a little bit and lower yourself carefully down onto your back. There we go, inch by inch, all the way down to lying back. Now, in this position, we want to set up neutral once again. And again, legs ideally just now would like them to be bent, but if that's uncomfortable, feel free to straighten them. Ribs, find your bottom rib. Now there it is, round the front. I can feel that bottom rib. Make sure that it presses into the mat. There's a gap under your lower back, and then your tailbone presses into the ground. And then we're going to do the same as we did when we were standing, but obviously the emphasis will be different. So breathe in and bring one arm forward and up. Take it out to the side, palm up, and then circle into the legs. Let's do it on the other side. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, because we're in a different position, gravity is having a different effect on the movement of our arm. So I feel as I open my arm, there's a little tug almost across my chest, along the top of my armpit, and even into my bicep, running down towards my elbow. Great. Now as you reach the last repetition, try both arms at once. So they come up, out, and in. Now again, as soon as I do this, every time, I've done it umpteen times I've done it, as I bring my arms up and out, it's fine when I do them one at a time, but when I do them together, my rib cage leaves the mat. So I need to really concentrate on keeping my bottom rib on the mat. It's a sort of semi-pleasant, semi-unpleasant feeling as you get to the widest point. To me, it almost feels like my arms are going to go into pins and needles, just ever so slightly. But it doesn't quite happen. Now this one is the last one. As the arms come up, bring them, instead of out, gently towards the ears. Now you may not want to go all the way. As you breathe out, tuck your chin onto your chest, round your back, and the arms come forward towards the knees. And we do that again. Breathe in as you lie back down. Breathe out, round the back, and bring the arms towards the knees. Now you could still do this with your legs straight. So if you don't want to have your knees bent, you can straighten the legs, that's fine. What you'll notice when your legs are straight is that you notice the stretch in your back a little bit more. And as you come with the arms towards the knees, you feel there's a little bit more of a stretch, maybe sort of underneath your bra strap, if that makes sense. but it's up to you. You can always have the knees bent or straight. Now on the last repetition, again with the legs either bent or straight, stay up and do a little side bend. First one way and then the other. Now I must admit that with my legs straight, I find it much harder not to move the legs. When my knees are bent, it's a lot easier to keep those legs still as I sweep from side to side. 4 or 5 to each side. That's the last one for me. And then relax down. Now where the legs are now, it becomes a little more important. So if you bend the knees, hip distance apart with the feet and the knees, and then just float one knee up and over the hip. Breathe in as you lower that leg back down to the floor. Same with the other side. So now we always start with the easiest version because this allows us to get control over the center, control over the back and the legs before we start to make it harder. It also gives you an option with which you can remain. So if you want to stay with this, stay with this. Alternatively, bring both knees up now. You've almost got to roll your bum off the ground slightly. So again, a bit like when we were sitting, it's almost like you need to get yourself out of the way before setting up the legs and going from the top down. Have a little think about the middle of your back and be sure that it's connected to the ground. And again, we're all going to be different, but for me it feels like I've almost got to turn and tilt my pelvis up towards the ceiling. So turning my front bottom up towards the ceiling means that I fire up those abs a little bit more, and it makes this movement less about my legs and more about my tummy. Now, when you're ready, and only if you want to, instead of dropping the toe to the floor, drop the knee, but slightly straighten the leg. So the knee goes away like before, lowering the knee towards the ground. But instead of the knee remaining bent, it starts to straighten. Now that becomes even harder because now your pelvis is going to want to tilt towards the mat. Try keeping it turned up towards the ceiling. And then as you reach the last one, really straighten the leg until it lands on the ground and pull the other knee in close. Now have you noticed your back now has, hopefully irretrievably, left the ground. So there is now a gap between my ribs and my tailbone. Let's do a little ankle rotation here. The knee that's in close, I'm holding my shin, but if you would rather hold the back of your thigh, then do that. And then I'm going to swap the legs over, check the back is in neutral, before I just draw circles with my big toe. Much easier in one direction, drawing inwards, than it is drawing outwards. Then as I breathe out, I'm going to swap the legs again and again, repeatedly changing leg and making the knee come in as close as it can. Now the back presses into the ground because both legs are off the ground all the time. If you're happy with that and you don't want to go any further, that's great. But if you'd like to go further, then bring your head and shoulders off the ground and start to increase the work in the tummy. Good. Now 4 more. 4, 3, 2, 1. And holding that knee in close, Lower the head and shoulders to the ground. And then lengthen both legs away, sweeping the arms up to the ears to take a nice big full body stretch. Now you've got a choice. I'd like you to come up to sitting. How you get there is up to you. So you could just roll up from here, or you could bend your knees and use your arms to bring yourself up. But your end point will be the same. We're going to be in a sitting position. Again, the cushion underneath your bum if you want it. The legs nice and straight, toes pointed up towards the ceiling. I'm going to take a deep breath in and bring the arms out as I lift up the ribs and then forward as I breathe out. Now, how high you take your arms is up to you. I find it helpful because when my arms come up, my ribs, as we've already discussed, want to follow, which means that I've got more room to move when I come forward. Again, you could do exactly the same thing on a little chair. So you could have your feet apart, knees bent, breathe in, and as you breathe out, you fold forward, breathe in, and roll back. And when you're on a chair, you've got less pressure going through the hamstrings. So it really is all about the back. Now, on the 8th repetition, we're going to hold it down. So when you come into that final rep, take a breather. Now I'm holding onto my feet, partly because I'm reasonably flexible in my hamstrings, partly because I've got orangutan arms, which means that my feet are not that far from my hands at any point, okay? Even when I'm standing up. So it's up to you. If you can reach your feet, then fantastic. Hold the feet and encourage the top of your head towards your toes. If your feet are miles away, then you've got an option. You can bend the knees and drop into it, or you can take a little towel and wrap it around the base of your feet and use that to bring yourself gently forward. The target for the stretch is the back. The side effect of the stretch is a lengthening in the hamstrings. Unless, of course, you're on the seat, in which case the hamstrings are not involved. Now, slowly but surely bring your way back up towards sitting and take the feet just that little bit wider, rising again right up onto your sitting bones. Breathe in and spread out the arms, then bring the hands behind the head. Now, I'm aware this might not be super comfortable, in which case you might want to fold the arms in front. I'm going to face you because it's a little bit easier for me to demonstrate. So the arms are out and then behind the head or in front. And then the arms are going to go back out again and then behind. So there's this lengthening and bending. And if you watch, the elbows are not moving. If you want to, you could do exactly the same thing here. So just bend and straighten the arms, but there's more flexibility required here. Now next time, when the hands are behind the head, just keep them there and then bring the arms in and out. And as the elbows go out, squeeze the shoulder blades together. Now, if your arms are folded, then you do just what we did when we were standing. So both moves do the same thing in the sense that they both squeeze the shoulder blades together. But this one involves that area around the sort of lymph glands a little bit more. So if that's where you need a stretch, or you've been told at some point this is where you ought to stretch, like I don't know, then go ahead and do it now. Next time, when the elbows are out or the arms are folded, stay there. Breathe out and just bend to the side. Now, oh, blimey, I'm tight today. Lift to the center and then bend to the other side. Now, the aim here is to get that rib cage to squish into your hip bone. So I want you to create a nice big crease here, there, as you bend down, okay? Trying to get that stretch on one side and work onto the other side. And when you've done 4 to each side, stay centered and twist. First one way and then the other. In theory, your elbows are not visible or only just visible out of the corner of your eye. Now for me, I can see my left one more than my right one. So I'm trying to pull that left one back a little. 4 to each side, and then reach the arms up, if you can. Turn towards a big toe, so I'm turning to my left big toe, and then I'm going to take my right arm to my left big toe and my left arm behind. Lift to the center, turn, left arm to right foot. Lift, turn, right arm to left foot. And vice versa. Doesn't matter which one you do first, but you're taking the opposite arm to the opposite foot. Now again, it's that lift in the middle. It's not critical. It's only there to help you get the rib cage up and over your tummy. Here we go. Last time. Then lift into the center. Wait there if you can. Bend the knees if you can. Bring the soles of the feet together and fold forward. Oh, blimey. I have got nothing here, right? Now, in theory, heels, toes together, pressing in, knees falling out to the side, you're right up on your sitting bones, going forward off your sitting bones, and trying to get your rib cage towards your feet so that your head, in theory, would land on the ground in front of your feet. Now, if I'm holding you back, on you go. Don't let me stop you from getting your head to the floor in front of your feet, okay? But for those of us that can't manage that, deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, trying to let the knees ease apart, trying to let the hips stretch. Now we're going to hold this stretch, and we're going to hold it from now for a full minute. Now we could hold this for anything up to 5 minutes, okay? And really experience the depth of the stretch. We're just going to take 1 minute trying to let go wherever we feel the tension, and I can feel it even in my feet. So try and let go and ease forward. And you know that this can be a really good progressive stretch. We can get a lot better at this stretch if only, I was going to say if only we practiced it, but then into my head came the words, if only we were younger. Okay, trying to go forward and down. Now, as we reach the minute mark, which we're just coming up to now, we're going to slowly bring ourselves back up to standing. Feel that in the lower back, and then bring the knees together. And just like we did before, I'm going to ease my hands to the back and drop the knees side to side, just like we did when we first sat down. A little bit easier, perhaps, now that we've just stretched out through the hips. Equal number to each side, and of course, ideally, we're still aiming for 8 to each side. There we go. Once more. Now, we're going to do exactly the same stretches, so that drop side to side and that hip stretch, but we're going to do them lying down. So in your own time and with care, roll yourself back and down. Reset neutral. Feet and knees hip distance apart to begin with. Spread out the arms. You don't need to spread the arms, that's just to get them out of the way. And then start by just opening and closing the knees. And again, I've got one of those backs that thinks it's helpful to stick my rib cage out to the ceiling. So let's remind yourself to tuck the ribs onto the mat. And then when you've done about 8 moving stretches, let the knees fall apart and bring the soles of the feet together. Now, I don't know about you, but that feels quite different to me. Now that I'm not over my legs, I can feel a stretch down my inner thigh a little bit more, and also into the kind of front of my hips a little bit more. So we're going to hold the legs apart, and again, we're going to take a whole minute here. If you want to, you could now rest your hands on the inside of your legs. Not to force the legs apart, but just to use the weight of the arms to just encourage the knees to separate. I've got one side that's more comfortable than the other and one side that's closer to the floor. If you wanted to gently rock, if that helps, or you just wanted to do a little bit of work into the obliques almost while you wait as a kind of optional extra, then feel free to do that there as well. And then as we reach the minute mark, I'm just checking on my watch where that minute is, good. Slowly drag the knees back into the center. I'm going to give you a choice here. You can either keep the feet on the floor as you drop the knees from side to side, or float the knees up and over the hips and drop the knees from side to side here. Now, of course, once your legs are in midair, it becomes much harder to control them. So that it's also, as well as a stretch, it's also about work in the muscles down the side of the body, the side of the back and the side of the tummy. Doesn't matter which one you do, use the one that helps you get what you need from this. Equal number to each side, but this time, as my knees drop over to the floor, I'm going to keep them there. And then I'm going to bring my back arm so that I clap my hands together. Now, all I'm going to do here is gradually bring you up to standing. If you don't like being face down for any length of time, or you don't want to be on your hands and knees, then that's okay. You don't have to do it. Just take your time and bring yourself up to standing. But if you're okay on your hands and knees, just let's take a little cat to cow, because that will give us the last bit of stretch into our back. First one way, and back and through the other. One more time. And this is where we're going to come up to standing. So I'm going to tuck my toes under so that I'm ready to come up onto my feet. I just elevate my knees an inch or two off the ground and push backwards so that my weight goes into my legs. Now it's up to you. You can go into a kind of down dog, or you can keep the knees bent and walk the hands towards the feet. Now, when you get there, stay down. Now, if this isn't comfortable for you, feel free to stand up in your own time. But if you can stay down, then stay down to catch your breath and to feel that last bit of lengthening in the back of the legs and in the spine. Breathe in, and as you breathe out, the tailbone is heavy, the belly button rises. We're going to hollow out the tummy, round the back, and rebuild that spinal column all the way through the neck, lifting your chin at the end. Roll the shoulders. Now do whatever you need to do. You might need to take a little walk. You might need to do a little hip circle, something just to get moving, a little bit of a dance. Don't know why I'm doing that. I'll stop now. I'm embarrassing even myself. And we are done for our class today. Well done, guys. Let me stop that recording.